Well, it's just turned 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 21st of February, 2026. And again, no one's here in this meeting at this particular moment. I'll talk about other things. And just a few minutes ago, I had something on my mind to talk about, but then I was distracted. And yet, again, I guess I'm talking about distractions, which I've been talking about for a few days. It makes me wonder if I can get distracted relatively easily. And I seem to be the only one producing messages in this group. Uh, Dave did one on evangelism at one stage, and he did another very short one about a beautiful spider web that was quite a sight being wet in the rain. It was a very interesting video, uh, as in visually. And I can sit here and just come up with things to talk about and encourage people to have a better relationship with God or to um, walk a more godly life or whatever it might be. I don't need to write a sermon. I don't need to look up scriptures beforehand. Why? Am I a highly developed minister? No. How long have I been in ministry? Well, I'm not. Uh, in one sense, I am in another. I am not a pastor, prophet, teacher, evangelist, or apostle. I do act at different times in all of those roles in different ways, though I am just a person, and my circumstance I'll remind you of one more time. I went to Bible college. I might as well give you a testimony. After all, what I thought of talking about a few minutes ago, again, I was distracted and I've totally forgotten what that was. So why not? I'll give you a testimony. I um, came to God as a teenager, and I don't even really recall the circumstances, but I'd gone to church a fair bit as a child. And I'd made a commitment as a young teenager and then sort of fell away slightly, but then went to a new church and became a rather mm, active Christian. So through my late teens and my early 20s, I was a rather active Christian. And then a larger falling away happened when I was, I don't know, maybe 22, probably say 23 years old. And I um, lived a rather worldly life. I would go out to the nightclubs every night of the week, and that would be my lifestyle. I would walk up to all the managers of the nightclubs every night and say, "Hi, how are you?" And they'd buy me a free drink. And, I'd drink my free drink and, maybe two and go off to the next nightclub because I wasn't going to get three free drinks. Um, and I'd go off to 10 or 20 nightclubs and have maybe 15, 20 free drinks and get drunk on the costs of the nightclubs. So, well, that was my lifestyle. Anyway, after a few years like that, when I was probably around about, well, let's see. This would have been early 1992. I was born in 64, so when I was 28, 27, 28, uh, 27 probably, I had an experience um, where I had thought about God and thought, well, God, if you're real, um, show yourself to me. And then a drunk walked up uh, and started talking to me about a few things, and we went off and chatted about a few other things. And he said, look, something like God wants you to know that you need to come back to God. And it was, okay, well, fine, I'll take this as God speaking. So I then went back to church for 7 or 8 years until my early 30s odd, until, well, the turn of the century, until about the year 2000, 2001. So in that case, I would have been 36. So after about 8 or 9 years, someone asked me a question which just stuck in my head and I couldn't answer it. And it drove me away from Christianity because of the nature of the question, which I'm not going to bring up right now. Anyway, before that, about 3 or 4 years before that, a prophet said that I will um, be in the wilderness for a long time, and then I will come back and have a ministry far more powerful than before. And that was a very similar prophecy that was then given by three different pastors and maybe one or two other people, all saying a very similar thing. So it was reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And I then went to Bible college for a couple of years. And this prophet that made that prophecy in the first case, I'd known of a lot of things that he's prophesied, and all of them were very accurate. So what I didn't realize was in the wilderness meant that I'd fallen away from the belief of God. I came to a point where I became a skeptic. I considered that, look, I don't have any evidence of a God, so therefore, why am I believing something that I don't have evidence for? And that's one of the things that made me fall away. And I've been in that wilderness now for about 24 years, 23, 24 years. And then 10 months ago, a time came about, and I got no idea of how the thoughts first started coming to me. But I started thinking, well, because I've got no evidence of a God, I don't have evidence that there is no God either. Now, I don't even have evidence that I exist. I can't prove that I exist. I could be somewhere else in some other kind of existence and merely having a physical dream. My dream is so powerful that it's physical. And this isn't reality, it's just a dream. I can't prove that wrong. Though, just like I can't prove that man walked on the moon, I believe man did walk on the moon. I can't prove that the earth is round because there's people that actually believe the earth is flat. But I believe it's round. And I have some slight evidence, and I say slight evidence because once you get up in the air like 70,000 feet or whatever it is where a jumbo jets fly, you can look at the surface of the earth and it looks curved. Um, so that gives some evidence that it probably is round, though I can't prove it because, I haven't actually been up in the space shuttle or whatever to be able to prove these things. So I applied that to God. Just because I can't prove that God does not exist does not mean that God does not exist. Because I can't prove that I exist. Okay? So, under that new rationale, I thought I'm going to choose to believe that God exists for um, there's four possibilities, and I'm going to go back to Pascal's wager right now. And Pascal's wager says there's four possibilities in life. Either God exists up here, there's two possibilities, and or God doesn't exist down here, there's two possibilities. And these two possibilities are that I follow God or I don't follow God. Okay? So God exists and I follow, God exists and I don't follow, God doesn't exist and I follow, God doesn't exist and I don't follow. Okay? Right? So four possibilities. Now, if God exists and I follow God, as far as Pascal's wager goes, I've got everything to lose, everything to win. A eternal life, a good eternal life. If God exists and I don't follow God, I've got everything to lose. A life that I'm looking towards, hell, for example. If God does not exist, as far as Pascal's wager goes, then if I believe in God, I'm only losing a few minor pleasures of life right now. But if I don't believe in God, I gain a few minor pleasures in life right now, which is very minor compared to what's at stake if God does exist. Now, let me advance Pascal's wager even one step further because this was my mindset partially when I came back to God. Because if God does not exist and I choose to live a Christian life, then I'm still gaining because I'm going to gain knowledge and wisdom that I wouldn't gain by not living the Christian life. I'm also going to gain traits that I'm not going to gain by living the Christian life. I'm going to gain love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, which if you're living without God, even if God does not exist, then chances are you've got the opposite. You've got hate instead of anger in your life. You've got trouble instead of joy. You've got trouble instead of peace, or sadness instead of joy, etc. So hang on. In under Pascal's wager, if God does not exist, there's a little bit to lose as a Christian. No, there's still something to gain, and there's still something to lose if you're not a Christian. Let me take that one step further yet again. What about the things that you may lose or not lose as a Christian if God does not exist? Okay, the pleasure of getting drunk. So, if as a non-Christian, hi Kathy, how are you this evening? I was just talking about my testimony and Pascal's wager. Um, I'll just finish this little bit. So, if God does not exist and I don't believe in God, that means that I supposedly gain the pleasures of being able to drink alcohol, etc. But as far as those pleasures go, they come at a cost anyway. You see, you have a fun night drinking alcohol, but you wake up the next morning with a hangover. So, whatever the world considers the gain is of not believing in God, it's still a loss, or there's still nothing to gain. Anyway, so that's basically Pascal's wager. So, Kathy, do you know of Pascal's wager? If you haven't got audio, you can just go yes or no. You do? Okay,
I just
great.
turned it on now. I'm not familiar with the term right off. I don't recollect, but
Okay, there's four possibilities in life. Either God does exist, two possibilities that you believe in God and He exists, you don't believe in God and He exists, or if God doesn't exist, there's two possibilities. You either don't believe or you believe and He doesn't exist, or you don't believe and He doesn't exist. So four possibilities altogether. So I was just getting to the last one. I was just saying, well, the first possibility is if God exists, there's heaven to gain and hell to uh, avoid. If God does not exist and you do believe, well, you're not. Pascal's wager says, well, you lose a little bit of pleasure in life by believing in God if God does not exist. But my view of that is that's incorrect because I've still got things to gain. I still gain love when in a world of hate. I still gain joy in a world of sadness. I still gain all the fruits of the Spirit. And then I went to the last point, which was where you came in. I was saying that what you have to gain when you're in the world and God does not exist is a few pleasures of life. Well, those few pleasures of life come at costs as well. I mean, somebody might go sleeping around with people and they're looking at the chance of getting VD, for example. There's major risks with all those potential little chances of a gain. So no matter what, you've always got something to gain out of God and nothing to lose. Any thoughts on that, Kathy?
oh well, I'm familiar with the different concepts. I just didn't know that that was the specific name to call
Yeah,
it. Or
it's
if I
called
had learned it
Pascal's
at some point
wager.
in life, I'd forgotten.
He was a Frenchman in the 16th or 1700s, and he was a scientist, and he invented the syringe. He uh, worked out that what do you call it in space? There's no whatever it is. He worked out the higher you get up towards space, the less. I can't even think of the term. And he also worked out hydraulics, how
Okay.
liquid pressure can make other things work, etc. And yeah, an incredible genius. And that was his concept. He turned to God in his 40s, I think it was. And his reasoning was, well, if God does exist and if God doesn't exist, I've got more to win if God exists and I believe in God. And I'm only missing out on just a little bit. Yes, so I was just talking about my testimony and how Pascal's wager comes along with that.
So don't let me interrupt. Go ahead with your testimony. I'll
Well,
listen
I
in.
was just getting towards the end of it, and basically, after contemplating Pascal's wager, I decided, well, I was going to um, choose to believe there is a God, whether there's evidence or not. And a verse that I go over lots is Ephesians 2:8, which says, for by grace we are saved through faith, and that is not of yourselves, but it is the gift of God. Um, now, if we're saved by grace through faith, hang on, through evidence, isn't it? No, hang on. Through truth, isn't it? Through fact. No, no, they're all wrong. It's through faith. You've got to believe even without the evidence. You've got to make that choice to believe. And it was like, oh, hey, that makes sense. I'm making a choice to believe in God without evidence. So once I'd made that choice, guess what happens? That um, sadness turns to joy. That anxiety turns to peace. The fruits of the Spirit come around, and it's like, whoa, there's something happening here. There's something happening inside me. And even though I didn't have that evidence at the first case, I've been coming to realize that the evidence is what God puts inside you. And the word grace comes from charis, and it's usually pronounced as charis, Charis. But if you add an MA to it, we don't say charisma, it's charisma. The H is silent. So charis is basically God moving on your heart so much that it becomes evident in your life. So we are saved by God moving on our heart and changing our lives Himself through our heart. It's like, well, that makes sense. That's what's actually happening with me. So I realized that you make the decision to believe, and then God shows you that He exists by what He does with you and your life and your belief. And that's pretty much the end of my testimony. uh, so, Kathy, any thoughts on that last bit?
How long ago was that you came to faith to
Oh, that's
believe?
what I was going to say. 10 months. Okay, it might seem like, look, I might talk like I know a lot more than somebody that's been a Christian for 10 months, but 25 years ago, I went to Bible college and then fell away. That's the bit that you didn't hear. Um, and I was asked questions that I couldn't answer, and that made me think about things that's like, well, the narrow door, the name of this very organization, is the one that few knock on and few walk the narrow path, where the wide door and the wide path, many travel that. Well, hang on. Why is God making it a situation where very few are going to believe in God? And the great majority, even if they think they believe in God, are going to walk away from God. They're not going to be walking towards God. And that was one of the questions that made me think. And I thought, well, hang on, that doesn't make sense. So I started trying to make sense of God. And you can't make sense of God. But the natural mind trying to make sense of God, I just perplexed myself and thought, hang on, this is senseless. And became a skeptic. But 10 months ago, everybody's just heard this. 10 months ago, I came up with this other thought that, well, I can't even prove that I exist. I could be somewhere else in some other existence having a physical dream. My dreams in this existence, wherever I may be, are so powerful that they come across as physical. And this is just a dream. Well, I can't prove that wrong. I don't believe that is correct. But I can't prove that man walked on the moon. I believe man walked on the moon. So even though I can't prove that I don't exist, it's no different to God. I can't prove that God doesn't exist. So why not choose to believe that I am real and that God is real? And that's what happened 10 months ago. And then my thought changed and the nature of myself changed. The sadness became joy. The um, lack of peace became peace. The lack of self-control became self-control. And I gained all the fruits of the Spirit and everything that I was saying. So, yeah, Any any thoughts yourself? Does that
Just wonder, you mentioned that, why did God make it so difficult with a narrow door? I think it's an assumption to think that he made a narrow door. I mean, in the sense that, yes, it's through Christ alone, but he knows the beginning from the end. So he knows that the few would go through, which
yeah,
he would call the narrow door. Um, so, yeah, we want to make sure we're on the right path. And it's easy to think that, oh, I believe in God, I know God, but the question is, does he know me? So at the end of it all, he doesn't say, depart from me, I never knew you. I want to be known of him.
absolutely. Now, what normally happens here is I normally have a subject that I would create as a Bible study and talk about, right, well, this one, I don't even recall what tonight's subject was going to be on. And
Okay,
if there
forgive
were
me, my first time. I just thought I'd pop in and see what y'all are about. So go
absolutely,
explain
and
away.
often I'll be sitting here by myself, and what I'll do is just talk about whatever comes up in my mind. Um, this morning I talked about the narrow door itself, and I talked on half an hour on that, where I'll just talk by myself and create a oh, what's the word? Like a sermon-like session, but not quite a sermon. But other times we've had like two, three, four people. It's never a big group, but there's usually, well, not usually, about half the time there'll be other people. It won't be just myself. And yeah, that we'll pick a subject and talk on that instead. So, how's the time going anyway? How long? Ah, it's been 26 minutes.
So
And,
I'm a bit late popping in, but I thought, okay, I just joined and wanted to see what y'all were about. I don't know that I can always join. My life's
no,
quite busy.
absolutely wonderful. Thank you for joining. I'd like you to join again sometime in the future. If you're in before the session starts, we will actually talk about whatever the intended subject was for that day. Today, I think it was about the Bible, the evidence of the Bible. Where have I got my subjects? Um, no, I've deleted that somewhere. Oh, no,
Like evidence demands.
yeah, I've deleted. It's hasn't disappeared entirely, but I've turned my list off. I guess I must have done that once I started talking when there was no one here. But yeah, look, glad you dropped in. Have you got any other thoughts? This will actually go get. Have you seen me talk on the page itself?
I haven't had a chance to watch any of it yet. I just thought, oh, the narrow door and your group of Christians who want to be more serious and go deeper into things of the Lord. And so I thought I would check it out and see what's going on.
Okay, great. I'll give you a quick idea of it. Well, firstly, the group is all about um, getting a strong relationship with God as a three-tier uh, situation. Getting a strong relationship with God is the first level. Discovering your calling and training in your calling is the second level. Launching your calling and having a community of believers, like-minded believers around you to support you in that early stage of that launch is the third level. So that's what the group is about. Now, it doesn't matter what church a person's in, what part of the world they're in. We're here to create a large group that will be able to support them locally as well. Like, for example, in Perth, Australia, that's on the western coast of Australia. Are you in Australia?
I am. I'm on the Gold Coast.
Oh, you're in the Gold Coast. So am I. um, yeah, your accent is American, so I thought, well, you never know. I better ask. But currently, there's very few people from the US that are in the group. It's mostly Australians because I'm currently advertising to Australia only at this stage. And there's about half a dozen, well, probably more like about a dozen people in the Perth area. And Why was I even mentioning that?
about the different support groups and churches.
Ah, yeah. Um, there was something that I was heading to in that direction, but there was something more specific than the general thought that I had right now. There's like, for example, there's one person over there who reached out and said, "Look, I haven't got a church at the moment, and it's a matter of I then got on to the other members. It's like, can anyone suggest churches, maybe even meet him at a church if it's your church, and this, that, and the other. Would you like to actually connect with other members of the group in your area as far as maybe go out and have a cup of coffee with them and talk about God, or and encourage each other to step out into ministry, or even to do the things that we're all called to do, like evangelism, etc." So that's the kind of thing that the group's about. And in the meantime, I have also created quite a few messages like sermons that were just me sitting at the desk here talking about a particular subject. And I got to a point where I stopped writing messages and looking up scriptures because I'd spend 6 hours of the day putting together a half-hour message, and then that half-hour message, it'd probably take me 40 minutes to actually speak that half-hour message because I'd sort of be reading it and I'd misread a line or misread a word and go back and reread it. And I'd find out that then I'd spend like 3 hours editing that 30-minute video, and there's 10 hours gone on one video. So I got to a point of, well, why don't I just talk about something? And I realized that I can talk for half an hour on a subject, and whatever scriptures that I can remember, I can utilize those. Especially considering I'm talking about Ephesians 2:8 an awful lot, because um, there's a lot in the word translated to grace, charis, and I keep learning more and more and more over the last 10 months on it, that I keep going back and it's like, oh, I've just learned this new thing. So let me talk about this for the next half hour. I've just learned this new thing. So I must have done at least half a dozen scriptures or sessions on Charis alone. And I'm finding it incredibly intriguing because that is the act of God. God, Thea describes Charis as, and this is over half an hour now, so I'll end up cutting the video about here. So good night, everyone else.